It's Missladypetal here. I'm looking at doing another documented life prompt, and it was actually to reuse some kind of packaging. Now, we've already done this on journaling Krazy Island style. However, I thought that I would approach it just that little bit differently. So recently, when my mum and dad were up, I took my dad to the Queensland Art Gallery, and while I was there I bought some lovely paintbrushes because they had a beautiful exhibition on watercolours, and they actually in their little gift shop set up like a little mini art shop for watercolours with watercolour brushes and prints and paints and papers. It was really awesome. Now, I bought some brushes and they gave them some of them were quite long, so they gave them to me in this massive big paper bag that had Queensland Art Gallery on it. Now, I used some of that as drop paper recently when I was decorating a lampshade, and I had a whole heap of teal paint that I started off, and I was using the jelly plate to transfer images, the inverse images, onto the fabric. So I didn't use the jelly plate actually per se on the fabric, but I impressed things onto the paint to get a very even coating on whatever it was I wanted to stamp, and then stamped it onto the fabric, which worked incredibly well. But then I had a whole heap of teal paint left over on the jelly plate, so I just impressed it onto the back of this bag. Now, I liked that, and I've used it as drop paper for, you know, other colours, and I've actually done bits and pieces, stuck it in there, and I just thought, you know what, this is the piece of paper that I actually want to use. So I've now got the back of the actual journal page, and I've already glued it on. I've decided that I'm going to actually use these elements in it, some from Happy Mail and some from my own painted papers. But I love the teal and the purple theme in this, and I have some of these gorgeous butterflies in the same colours that I'm actually going to use on the page as well. I haven't decided yet exactly what I'm going to say, but this picture really speaks to me, and it came to me from Gina Aarons, and I just absolutely love it. I think it talks a little bit about that which we keep hidden and is underneath layers and layers, because it looks like this image is under the water and we're pressing into it, trying to get through to what's underneath. So that's what I'm going to start with today. Bear with me, I haven't actually thought through any of the composition of this yet, so I'm going to go away and think about that, and then I'll be back. Okay, so I've decided that I'm going to use this handmade block. So I've made it out of craft foam. So I just drew a whole heap of, you know, rough brick or square and rectangle shapes. Mounted it on another piece of funky foam, and then put it on a wooden block. Now, these days, this was one of the first stamps I made, and to be honest with you, I would now do this on 2 layers of cardboard. I'll go and show you one of my cardboard stamps. Okay, so this is exactly the same sort of thing, but it's on 2 layers of cardboard, and it's far more springy when you press it. This is, of course, very dense and heavy, so you've got to be careful about the way that you apply the paint. Great for jelly printing, but got to be careful about the way that you actually decide that you're going to apply the paint. So in this case, I'm actually going to apply I've got some, this is a different shade from that, the Liquitex teal, or aqua green as they call it, but it's very similar. So I'm just going to use a rough brush and just kind of bring it down, just to kind of marry that through. I'm going to get like a baby wipe. This is actually a dry baby wipe. And just rub some of it out. Because I want to see some of the colours underneath. So it's always good. It'll always leave some there, but you'll get some other things showing through. And it makes it dry fast, which is what I want. Okay, so it's not as uniform as I would like it yet, but by the time I'm finished it will be. That picture that I showed you earlier, I'll just bring it back. So this picture that I've decided is going to actually be kind of in the centerpiece and the focal piece of this, I've decided to make it into a transfer. And I'm interested to see how the green and the colour actually translates into that transfer. And then that'll go on this coloured background, and I think it will just look quite ethereal, you know, like really, really quite great. And so I'm just, at the moment, before, you know, like, because I've got to go through like 6 coats of this. So, and before I can, so it takes a while to do a transfer. And so I'm just going to work on some background images here. So with this one, I'm going to layer this in some paint, in some coordinating paints that blend in and darken. So I'm just going to, and these are just cheap craft paints. This one is Folk Art Enamels Frost Blue. And I'm going to use a foam brush, much better than a normal bristle brush, to just lightly go across. Gives a streak-free kind of finish. And you do go through a lot of paint when you do this. Okay, so I'm just going to do that. And the rule of 3 is that you will do this in 3 places around your page. We tend to, as human beings, we tend to love odd numbers of groupings of things. And this is just one of the layers that I'm using. And I'm just spreading the paint that was already there and in between the bricks. Just going to spread some of that excess paint and then repaint some of the bits that were stamped and impressed. And so there's not as much give, so it doesn't give as beautiful an impression, but I'm quite liking that so far. And I'm just going to wipe this over again. I have a lot of rags, old t-shirts and things, so I'm just going to wipe that off. But you can, because there's not a lot of paint on it, but I could put it on drop paper. I've got drop paper here, but I could do that, but I can't be bothered at the moment. It's easier just to get the rag and do that. And wipe that up. So I'm also thinking of using this one as well. It's a bit geometric, but in the overall scheme of layering, it's going to be good. And remember, I'm going for more pink, I'm going for teal, and I'm going for violets, but I'm using cool tones here because it will be layer upon layer upon layer. So before I do any more with the stamp, I'm thinking I'm going to collage a little bit of this because I really like it. And again using that rough rule of 3, but that'll work well. I'm going to use some Mod Podge, and this is my Mod Podge brush. I always dry it off before I stick it in the Mod Podge. You don't want it to buckle your paper as much as possible. And this is an old paintbrush that's really not good for anything else but glue. Stiffening in the bristles up here, very well used and old, and splays out like that. Perfect for glue. And I don't mind using this matte Mod Podge because it gives a very matte finish, which means you can apply things over the top. And when I'm looking at collaging, I usually go over the top I'm not going to worry about it so much because there'll be paint going over that. And I usually scrape all these down, so I'll put them all on and then I'll scrape them down, because you really want to have a smooth surface. There are some times when I really like my stuff to buckle, but this isn't one of them. This also helps to reinforce any joins on any corners. Not that I've done it on all, but you know, where I do. And of course you'll do that over some of the paint as well. You get no globs. And there's also, like, I think you can see this line here. That's a natural line in the bag. So eventually we're going to paint over that, but I'm going to lay that down with a bit of glue, just so it doesn't keep lifting, because as you wet it, and that glue again will be covered. That paint's pretty much almost dry as well. There. This Tombow glue's like super tacky and sticky. You never know what's going to happen with it. I think I've got a purple. I'm going to have a look for purple paint. So it's Montmartre Violet. It's about the only blue purple I have. Apart, I've got a Darks Pen purple, but it's not the same. So I'm going to use this stamp here and just use parts of it. I'm not going to use the whole thing. I have designed it as long to go long enough on a whole page, but I'm not going to do that here. I have a little bit of water in this foam stamp now. Flicks it everywhere. Holds heaps. But that's okay, keeps it nice and wet. And this is a dimensional paint, so it's much thicker. So I often add water or airbrush medium to these, but I might use some matte gel just to make it more of a glaze for stamping, because I don't want it so thick. And I'll just get a palette knife and mix that up. It's how you don't get, if you mix these up with palette knives, it stops your paint getting up into the bristles. Even though I've got a foam brush, it's not great for mixing. I'm just wanting a light coating. It doesn't have to be perfect. This is a thicker funky foam, so it's much taller. You can see, taller. Oh, I'm liking that. And all of this is just going to go into the background. So none of it you'll see in its own big thing at all. I'm happy with that. I may just put a little bit more with the palette and mess it in. I love using a palette knife. I use it a lot in my fine art paintings. So we're getting away from having, you know, just that teal page, and it's not becoming completely overpowering now. So I need to think, what am I going to use the rest of that purple paint for? I have, what will I use? I have some drop paper. And these are drop papers that I use on a regular basis. Cut. And I've got some tags here. Might as well paint them. I'll get them out of the way first. To our page, and that's actually sitting up the right way. Yep. And I'm liking the body that I'm making up with that at the moment. Now I think it's time to add something in. I think I'm going to punch some circles out of that little bit. So it's at that time now where you just think to yourself, oh, I'm going to just keep layering. For all that to dry a lot before I can do anything else really on it. I mean, I can obviously add some more elements in if I really want to, but at this stage I'm thinking I'm going to let that dry as it is, and then I'll be back and I'll start on the next layer. Okay, so this is dried and I'm looking to add another layer, but I thought I would use some Tim Holtz Distress Paint in Squeezed Lemonade. And I like it because it's really quite translucent and it's not going to put too much warm colour in there. It's not a really warm and orangey yellow, and therefore it will blend into this background quite well. So I'm looking at going to rub it on one of these. They're like those felt sticky borders that you get for scrapbooking. But I like them, and I use them on the sticky side because they actually make a better impression. And I'm thinking, rather than butterflies, that I will go flowers. And you know, like, people give me these now because they make awesome stamps. And I'm not going to make it really perfect, but these dabbers are great because you get a really watery surface. They don't dry really fast when you're dabbing them on like this. And I'm just wanting to put I've got some threads obviously from a previous project, and because they're felt on the other side, I just grab them in. And then I'm going to get my brayer, pull more of those threads out. That's annoying. Right, I'm going to get my brayer and just pop that down one edge. Now, if you're just using your fingers to do the impression, you're not going to get a very good impression. But I'm using a brayer, so I get to press down. And I'm just going to go with whatever leftover yellow there is, just because it will blend in with the background better. How pretty is that? I'm just going to do another one here. It won't be, it'll be like an echo. It won't be nearly as big. Fabulous. And then what I love about the distress paint so much is that I can just spray it and blur it a bit. So it will just reactivate and blur a little bit. I just want you to see the rough image of it there. And I'm going to get this rag of mine and just start. I'm just going to blur out the edges because I don't want it to look like that it's kind of this perfect impression. I'm just kind of blurring bits out of it so that you can see that it's there but not terribly well. And with these distress paints you can do a lot. And I'm actually going to wipe these circles off a bit. Because I think it looks pretty cool that they'll be wiped off and not part of that impression. So that I've got some drips coming down on the side here. It's looking pretty good. I'm liking, and that yellow does not overpower any of the cool tones in there. It adds another layer, and you'll be able to see if you look at it, just some rough imprints of those flowers. But I really wanted it to not be a huge impact on it, and as it dries it will become a little bit more translucent, which I'm loving. Particularly over the you know, strong acrylics that are underneath. You can see them through, and this is what I love about layering. You get this beautiful layer upon layer upon layer look. Okay, so that's dry, and I'm going to add in a little bit of peacock feathers in distress paint. Not so much to white out a lot, I just want to use it to obscure some of these marks down the middle, because that's where the middle of the transfer is going to go. So this is dry, and I'm thinking I'll do a bit of doodling, not with a gold pen. Don't know why I pulled that out. Probably because I wasn't looking at what I was doing very well. I'm looking for a black. Oh, perfect. Right. So I'm using uni chalk marker. I'm using a Pentel paint marker, probably a Pilot multi-ball, and a food ball, which is a Dina Wakley pen, which goes over just about anything. And there's a dark blue Posca marker there. I've got lots of markers, but I'm kind of limiting myself to those colours right now. And I kind of want to make some further doodles and definition in the page without overpowering it. And I like that recurring pattern down the back. I think I might go with the black, doodling in this square part here, because I want to start defining some separate areas within this page. And I'm still thinking about the saying for this page, you know, and the way that the elements will move, because I think it's a bit timely now that I start looking at some of the other elements that I was looking at adding in. So this is a mini, and I'm thinking of cutting out some of these butterflies because I've got these other butterflies. I don't particularly want this pattern in that's here, but I like some of the flowers as well. So I'm sitting here thinking, what will I, and this isn't a particularly translucent one either, so if it's not translucent, and see how white that is on the back, it might be an extra layer, but I can't see the layers. I think this is only a 2-ply thing. And you can keep these, you can use them, and they can soak up sprays and inks and paint and things, and then you can use them as part of painted papers, but they have that fabulous sort of translucent collage quality to them. So make sure you don't throw those under things away. So I think I'm going to cut out some of the elements of this and start using it to layer on the page a little bit. I don't want to use it in entirety because it's not translucent, so I'm not going to see much of my background behind those elements. So I need to treat them like they're, you know, like stickers, or, you know, something that's really opaque. Alright, I'll be back after I've cut some of those out. I've fussy cut out all the little bits of the napkin that I wanted to use, and I found that by doing little groups of flowers that I could layer, so that just adds a little bit more dimension. And the yellow here just picks out the colours of the purple butterflies, not including any of these that I'll probably add in last, absolutely last. So what I need to do is just gently paste in all of the ones that, and I'm going to use my homemade Mod Podge because it's thinner and much easier to lay flat. Okay, so I had intended to put a transfer here, but unfortunately it was on an old book page, and it didn't matter what I did, I could not get those last bits of furry bits off. And of course you can see that it's very milky, can't see my fingers through it, and the particular gel that I used did not go completely clear. So that has told me that I cannot use that cheaper kind of gel for transfers. So I'm sitting there going, well, okay, well, I'm going to have to use my Liquitex gels, because all the transfers that I've done using those have turned out perfect, and this was a complete and utter mess. So even the best of us, when we have our trials and we try new things, we still are a little bit hit and miss. So I have this textured thing here, but I don't know what to do with it at this point. But I'm not going to use it on this page. So I've been wanting to use these new stamps that I've gotten for ages, and I haven't yet. So I decided to use them. So what they say is, live fully, laugh heartily, relax daily, love completely, and enjoy the journey. And I think, even though that this is a bit of a different sort of attack on what I'm doing, I'm really thinking that I like it. And obviously I've already stamped it, so it doesn't matter whether I like it or not. But I'm now thinking, well, I'm just going to get my white Signo pen, and I think I'll just outline it a bit. So that you can see what's happening on the page. And I'm thinking, well, we can just add a little bit of white, extra white into these edges here, just to give it that little bit extra oomph. And I'm thinking, I'm happy with that, but I think I need something extra. So I'm gonna get my, and I need to sharpen it, and it's a Aquarelle Stabilo all pencil, but it's an 8041, which is like a deep blue, and just needs a bit of a sharpen. And I always try and do it right where the blade is so that I don't waste it, even though that's inadvertently what's happening. Right, okay, so funny. So I've used black in here, but because I've got a lot of purple and teal, it seems right that when I'm doing the outer parts of this, that I will then go for the blue. Liking how it's defining the bottom half of the page, and it's looking all ripply and pooling. I can just sort of spread that out a bit now and get that kind of mottled effect or rippled effect that I was looking for. And of course the collage and all the stamps, you can see the diamond patterns down here working through, but they still add to that depth. I'm just going to add just that little bit of colour that's left on my brush, taken bled out from a couple of these areas, just to add into this background here. For blending out. Yeah, I'm really liking that. And I've also got this tag at the top, and it's just sitting there. It looks odd at the moment, doesn't it? I think it does. So I'm thinking that I should write something in it, but I kind of want to write something on its side so it doesn't detract from the page at all. So, and with that generalised theme of living fully and laughing and heartily, I think it would be good for me to talk a little bit about my journey, because I've spent a good portion of my life not being a really happy person, and I had this life-changing event happen when I was about 38, and I just amazed, really amazed at the change in me and the difference that that's had in my life. So I might just put that in white so that you can see it, but I'm going to put it on the side so it's not always easy to read and not there unless you really look. So what I've said here, I'll just zoom in. So what I've said here is I have not always been able to live fully, laugh heartily, relax daily, love completely and enjoy the journey. And at the bottom, when this dries, I will add in the words, but now I do. Because that is really about, it takes this from being a cliche, which it kind of is, right? As much as I love it, it's cliched, to it being a personal expression of something in my journey and applying it to me. So I'll just add that in, and then I will show you the finished page, and that'll be the end of the video. So remember, do learn something today because it keeps you young. And I can attest to that, particularly in my art. But as long as your brain is working, and as long as you're learning and you're creating about something that you're passionate about, I do believe it keeps you young. So, ciao for now from Missladypetal.